Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Graceology with Gwen Smith podcast. I'm Gwen Smith, and I'm really glad you've joined me today. Around here, we have fun, faith-focused, grace-filled conversations, all to help you know and trust God more. Our discussions are honest, often humorous, and always practical. And they're going to encourage you in meaningful ways to live out and lean on the grace of Jesus in the midst of cluttered, messy days. You got any of those? I know I do, and I can't wait to get to today's show, which is all about raising kids with love and grace. My guest is New York Times best-selling author and podcast host Crystal Paine. She's well known for being the money-saving mom, but now Crystal has penned a vulnerable new book called Love-Centered Parenting, where she shares the life-changing lessons God's been teaching her about raising kids with love and grace. Okay, Mama, be honest with me here. Do you ever worry that you're messing up your kids? Do you get stressed out when you think about their futures? I mean, who doesn't, right? I know how you feel. The struggles of parenting are beyond real. Today, you're going to hear how a life-altering situation with one of her children led Crystal Paine to dig in and transform her parenting philosophy. She shares the raw account of how she had to make some changes as a mom, which transformed her relationship with God and her entire family in the process. We can't control the outcome or the results of our parenting, but we can choose to build our responses on the sure foundation of Jesus and His Word. So if you're ready to parent from a place of freedom and rest, giving your children what they truly need to thrive in this world, you're going to love today's Graceology episode. Well, Crystal Paine, it is so good to welcome you to the Graceology podcast. Thanks for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, around here, we always start off our conversations with what we call the fast, fun favorites round. So we're going to put you on a hot seat just to get to know you in a more girlfriendy kind of way. So are you ready?
Ready or not, here I am. So.
All right, here we go. Crystal, coffee or tea?
Tea.
Early or late?
Both. Is that loud?
Absolutely. Okay, how tall are you?
I'm 5'3.4". That 0.4 is very important.
I love it. What's your guilty pleasure?
Reading and Instagram.
Nice. Okay. What skincare or makeup item would you never want to live without?
Mascara. Yes, I have CoverGirl Lash Blast mascara, and I'm a big fan of 3 coats of it every day.
Well, that was specific, and I love that. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at driving?
My husband would say it's not one of my core competencies, but I do a lot of it.
Fair enough. Okay. What was your favorite song or music artist from the 90s?
Okay, we're going to go deep here because actually we were not allowed to listen to anything contemporary. We could only listen to hymns or classical music growing up because I grew up in a very conservative home. So I don't really know because I only know hymns and classical music from that time period for real.
Oh my word. Well, that's an answer. There you go. Okay, here we go. Here's an easy one. Chips and salsa or French fries?
French fries.
Favorite movie?
I really like the Marvel series, The Avengers.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, cool. This is going to be interesting given that you just gave me the background, but who was your first celebrity crush?
I don't know that I ever had one. No. Because we didn't watch TV. So, yeah. Okay.
And the final question, I love it. The final question in your Fast Fun Favorites round is this. Crystal, give me your top 3 money-saving tips for women.
So I always encourage women, if you want to cut your budget, start with your grocery budget because everyone has to eat. Everyone needs to buy groceries. And so it's very easy to find ways to cut your grocery budget. And I always encourage people, one, you need to start with planning a menu. And then once you feel really comfortable with that, make sure that you're planning a menu based upon what you already have on hand and what is on sale at the store. Usually the store flyer, the front page of the flyer is what they call their loss leaders. Those are the things that basically they're taking a loss for you to walk into the store and buy, and they're hoping that you're going to fill up your cart with lots of other things, but you don't necessarily have to, and you can plan your menu based upon those things. And then also really work on just shaving your grocery budget down by 1% to 3% every single month. A lot of people, they get this idea that they want to cut their grocery budget and they're like, we're going to save 50 to 60% starting tomorrow. And then they last for about maybe 3 days, 3 weeks, and then they burn out. So it's so much easier if you just say, we're going to cut it by 1% to 3% every single month. And over time, that's really going to add up. And we've got lots of great ideas on moneysavingmom.com for being able to make that happen.
Well, that was very comprehensive. And man, you just knocked that one out of the park. So great. Okay, so for the sake of my Graceology community, would you go ahead and just introduce yourself to let my listeners know kind of what God's had you doing and what he has you doing now?
Yes. So my husband and I have been married for 18 years, and we have 4 biological kids. They're 16, 13, 11, and 9 months. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
11-year gap there. We're also foster parents. We just recently said goodbye to a sweet little boy who was with us for 8 months last year. He actually came home from the NICU 4 weeks before I had my daughter. So we had basically twins for all of quarantine and then months after that. And so then we live in the Nashville, Tennessee area. I'm the founder of moneysavingmom.com. I have been blogging there since 2007. And my husband and I, it's our full-time gig. And we also have a podcast called The Crystal Paine Show. And sometimes in my free time, when I have some, I also teach people how to blog over on yourbloggingmentor.com. And I have written, this is my 4th book. I wrote my last book in 2015, said I was never writing another book, and then God had other plans, and I'm writing on a topic that I said I would never write on, and this book has parenting in the title. But, you know, sometimes God calls you, or lots of times God calls you to those things that feel very scary and outside your comfort zone.
Absolutely. And you know what they say, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yes, absolutely.
I actually love what you do on the regular with Money Saving Mom, because I'm a girl who loves a great bargain and loves those kind of tips and guides, because it's so practical and so useful. And we're really practical around here. So I'm excited to get into your story, hear a little bit about the story behind the book, and then the ways God has been teaching you through the journey of parenting. But I would love for you to just go ahead and start off with that. So you write this book, Love-Centered Parenting. You've been in the money saving space. What? How did this happen? What's the story?
About 4 years ago, I hit rock bottom as a mom and really just had to learn how to parent from the get-go all over again, because we ended up landing in the principal's office with my husband and a child, and finding out that this child had been for months really acting out at school. We didn't know about this and kind of had been labeled the bully, and then had done something the day before this trip to the principal's office that had broken the school's code of conduct. And this child just really spiraled out of control after this came to light, and ended up being asked not to return to school, and then became suicidal. And we ended up in the ER. Nothing prepares you for parenting a child who you're walking into the ER with saying, my child's suicidal. And in that, just that really, really low place of just not knowing where to turn or what to do. And we were calling multiple different counselors' offices that were highly recommended to us. And they would tell us, you know, we're not accepting new clients, or we can't take your child because they're of the situation. It's just too severe. And it was just a really lonely, scary place of desperation, because we knew our child needed significant help as soon as possible. And we felt so alone and unable to really, you know, there's not a book that tells you, here's the next step you need to take. And so that's really what this book came out of. Not that I'm going to tell you exactly the next step you need to take, but it's more my journey of hitting rock bottom, and then the truths that God taught me in that, and then learning to parent all over again, from no longer being a rules-based parent or focused on my reputation, but really focusing on relationship with my kids and what it looks like to parent from a place of knowing how much I am loved by God and then living out of that love to my kids.
Yeah. So you start off the book with that story, and obviously it's shocking. I know it was shocking to you. You expressed that clearly. And I know that even as you share that, all of a sudden we went from big picture to really, really raw heart matters. So you're in the emergency room, you're trying to figure out what to do because your child is suicidal, and you're feeling, I'm sure, and you say this in the book, that you're feeling like, how did I get here? So you go on this journey with the Lord, and you start to just evaluate and put under the microscope just the whole parenting, which is a journey. It is a journey in of itself. I have 3 young adult children, and it's even still a journey. But so when you're in the emergency room, what happened that really, I know you write about this, what happened that really kind of started you on that journey towards love-centered parenting?
So I was feeling this place of desperation, and I can remember exactly what that room looked like. And I can remember sitting in that chair and just feeling like, I don't know what to do. Like I'm at my wit's end. I got nothing. Like nothing has prepared me for this, and no one is taking my hand and saying, okay, here's what you need to do next. And just crying out to the Lord and saying, God, please help me. I cannot do this on my own. And I'm really scared of what this is, what the future is going to look like. And my child needs help, and I can't figure out how to help them. And it was just this profound moment of God just meeting me in that place and saying, I love you and I'm with you. And that was what I needed at that moment. And it wasn't like he revealed to me, here's what the next 4 years are going to look like. But it was just, I love you and I'm with you. And I'm so grateful because the next weeks and months were really hard. And there was a uphill battle of climbing up out of that pit, but knowing that God was with me and he was going to be faithful, I couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah. So parenting is hard, but then when you add such a big challenge into it, it does. It can throw you into a tailspin and wreck you. So love basically was what you felt the Lord was just whispering into your heart and into your mind. And so how did you figure out what that needed to look like in terms of you experiencing it for yourself and the depths of that, and then how to begin to apply that in your parenting in a way that was different?
So I look back and I can just see how God orchestrated so many things. And it's just, how hindsight, we can see so much more. In the moment, it felt so scary and there was so much desperation, and so many times when I was just crying in my closet, crying out to God because my child was just spiraling out of control and there was nothing that we could figure out that would work. But we found a therapist who was willing to start meeting with our child. And before the child went in for the first therapy session, the therapist had us come in, and I remember my husband and I sitting across from her on this couch and saying to her, we're at our wit's end. We are desperately in need of help, and we just feel like I don't know if anything can help our child because nothing's working and it's just getting worse. And if there's anything that you can come up with that we could do or change as parents, would you please let us know? Because we want to do anything. We want to do whatever it takes. And a few weeks later, the therapist, after meeting with our child multiple times, called me in and said, remember when you said about if there was anything you could do? Well, I really feel like that you are trying so hard to fix your child, and what would it look like to just walk with your child? And over the next few days and weeks, I just let that play over and over and over again in my head. And I started paying attention to my responses. Anytime one of my kids would act out or make a mistake or lash out or be upset or do something that was wrong, I realized that my just knee-jerk reaction was to run in and, give them a sermon, tell them why what they had done was wrong. Let's come up with a fix. Let's try to, make this okay again. Let me come in and let me fix it for you. Tell you why what you did was wrong, and let's make it right. And I realized I was spending so much of my time kind of nitpicking my kids and correcting their bad behavior instead of connecting with them. And I started asking myself, why am I doing this? And I feel like why is one of the most important questions that we can ask. Just to ask why. What is the root of this? Why do I feel like it's constantly my responsibility to be nitpicking and correcting my kids? And it really, as I dug down deep, it was connected to these core lies that I had believed about myself for years and years, that I wasn't enough, that I was a failure, that I was a disappointment to people closest to me. And I just, was like, well, how's this connected? And realizing that I felt like I needed to do more, be more, try harder, be better, achieve a certain level of perfection as a parent, achieve a level of, that my kids are good kids, that I'm a good mom. And that would somehow then give me affirmation, and it would allow me to feel like, I'm enough. And I was chasing after that enoughness. And I started realizing that my insecurity was fueling my need to fix my kids, because I wanted to look good to others, and I wanted to look good to God, and I wanted to be accepted by others, and I wanted to be accepted by God. And in the process, I was kind of missing the whole point. I was, focusing on results and focusing on my reputation instead of focusing on relationship. And so as I really dug into that more, I started paying attention to the lies that were in my head that, when I'd hear that you're not enough or you're failing, and I started calling it a lie, which for the longest time was really hard for me to do that, because I felt like, well, I am a failure and I am not enough. And those lies had permeated my existence for so long that they had become my truths. They'd become the labels that I wore and the lies that I led with. So I would walk into a situation and instantly just feel like I'm not enough. And that would then basically cloud every interaction with anyone else, because I would constantly be feeling like I need to measure up. I need to do more, be more, try harder. I need to achieve their approval. How do I win their approval? And so I started calling those things as lies and then replacing those lies with truth. And I really talk about how to do this in my book, Love Centered Parenting. But this was the first step to freedom for me, because I had to unearth those false beliefs that I believed about myself and ultimately about God, in order to make space for the truth to permeate my soul. And, if you cram so much truth into your brain and into your life, it doesn't allow space lies. And so the more that I replaced the lies with truth and started saying the truth. So if I would think I'm a failure, I would call that out. No, that's a lie. What is the truth? The truth is that I am enough in Christ. He has forgiven me. He has redeemed me. He has covered me with his blood. When he looks at me, he doesn't see a failure. He sees Jesus. And I'm going to camp in that, and I'm going to believe that, and I'm going to continue to tell myself that over and over and over again. And the more that I told myself, the more that my brain began to rewire so that it could actually be truth to me. And then it allowed me to start being able to live out of that truth. And I talk in the book about how I was listening to a podcast one day, and it was the Trim Healthy Mama podcast, and they had a guest on, and they were saying something about, she was saying, I asked myself the question, how would loved me live? What would loved me do? How would loved me act? And I really pondered that question, and I realized, how would it change my life if I truly, to the depths of my soul, believed that I am wholeheartedly loved by the creator of the universe? How would it change my interactions with other people? How would it change how I walked into a room? How would it change how I parent? I realized, being online for so many years, you're just used to constantly, there's this barrage of people who they don't like what you're doing. They're disappointed in you. They're calling out, what you're doing wrong or what they disagree with. And that when I believe that I'm wholeheartedly loved by God, it's like I can lay my shield down. I don't have to defend myself because I know to the depths of my soul that I'm loved by God. So I can lay down my defenses and I can just love freely. And the same thing with my kids. If I know that I'm wholeheartedly loved by God, I can just love them out of that love. I'm a conduit of God's love to my kids, and I don't have to worry about what other people are thinking of me or worry about, what's going to happen in 10 years from now with my child. I can just love them today. And there's so much freedom in that.
Yes, there's so much freedom in love. You're 1000% correct. Hey guys, I want to hit you with a personal challenge. We talk a lot around here about studying the Bible, and here's why. Everything about your relationship with God grows stronger when you're intentional to get to know Him more by studying His Word. It informs your emotions, increases your courage, decreases your doubt, and bolsters your believing. All amazing things, right? It helps you move forward in faith and experience the power, perspective, and peace God provides. So I'm inviting you to download a free 5-day Psalm Challenge that's going to guide you on an exciting journey with the Lord. Go to psalmchallenge.com. That's psalmchallenge.com and take the free 5-day Psalm Challenge. I promise you these 5 days of focused study will bless you so much. Your book, Love-Centered Parenting, is written, you talk about even at the beginning of the book, that it's written for young moms or grandparents of young children. And yet there's so many universal principles to what I see you wrote and what God has taught you in this journey. And I want to kind of unpack kind of a little bit more about the practical side of what that living loved looks like in parenting. But I also want to back up for a minute, because one thing that you said really struck a chord with my heart. You said that, for years, your parenting style looked like correcting versus connecting. And I relate to that. And I'm just wondering, why do you think that is our natural tendency? And then I also want to know your thoughts on how much of the way we were parented do you think goes into the way we parent?
I think definitely that the culture that we're raised in can definitely impact the way that we grow and our beliefs. And it also then can impact how we live. And I feel like we all have kind of this baggage that we carry around with us. Yeah. We are all the walking wounded because we all have wounds in our past. And, I think that for me, recognizing that gives me so much grace for other people, and also to know that we're all doing the best that we can, and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to mess up. And the beauty of it is that that's where there's Jesus. Yeah. And so, you ask, why do we focus so much on correcting instead of connecting? And I think a lot of it really stems from, at least for me, it was that pride piece of wanting other people's approval and finding my identity in my kids, and finding that instead of finding my identity in Jesus, I cared a lot too much about my kids' behavior. And I had almost made my reputation and my parenting an idol of sorts. And I was working so hard to protect that and protect my, what I appeared like to other people, because I wanted other people's approval. And when I was writing this book, I actually asked on my Instagram account, I'm The Money Saving Mom on Instagram, and I asked on there for people to fill in the blank. I said, my job as a parent is to blank. And I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of responses. And I would say, by and large, 98 to 99% of the responses were things that we ultimately have no control over. People saying, I want to raise kids who love Jesus and who go out and make a difference in the world. That's a wonderful aim, but we can't save our kids.
Right.
We cannot choose our kids' choices. Ultimately, we can try really hard when they're little to bubble wrap and overprotect and, set up all these rules and boundaries to keep them safe. And some of those things are good, especially when they're younger. But if we continue to do that as they get older, they never grow backbone. They never grow wings. They never learn how to fly. And ultimately, the goal is to launch our kids. The goal is for them to become adults. But if we just treat them like kids and continue to protect them from ever struggling at all, because our heart is good. So often, we love our kids and we want the best for them. But are we stifling them and paralyzing them by setting up everything so that they can't fail? And so to realize that, having that, thinking that our job as a parent is to raise kids who love Jesus and who are successful in life, that is going to create such burden for us because we're constantly going to be going around, and anytime our child fails, it's our job for performance is on the line. We failed as a parent because our child made a mistake. If we see that as our job, or if we see our job is to raise these, successful, ambitious kids of character, we can't control what our kids are ultimately going to do. But I think we try to correct because we feel like that's what a good parent does, is that, and we take on the job of Savior and Holy Spirit for our kids instead of pointing them to Jesus. We try to kind of be Jesus for them. And instead of letting them fail and learn from failure, we protect them from ever having to fail. Instead of letting them struggle and learn from struggle, we just keep them from that. And, I think there's this balance, because obviously when they're really little, we don't want to just let them drink the bathroom cleaner and be like, well, just learn from that.
Exactly.
As we get older, we have to let go. And so in the book, I talk about what your job actually is as a parent. And I really encourage you, instead of viewing it as a job, as a calling, and 4 choices that I challenge you to make. And that is to lean in and love, to listen well, to lead with humility, and to let go. And I feel like this is what I want to wrap my time and life around in my parenting. And there's so much freedom there when I'm focused on not my reputation, not the results, but just my relationship with my kids and walking that out.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that you were perking up a lot of ears, because I know as a mom and as a lot of women who are listening, whether they're moms or aunts or grandmas, or even just a sister to a young person, it's amazing how many opportunities we have to come alongside of others. And it is so easy for us to just be flippant and to correct and to think rules versus relationship and heart of the matter. So for you've got this rock bottom experience. Now you're recognizing that God's going to have to help you get there in a new way, in a better way. So what did that journey look like for you in practical ways when you were trying to figure out how to change your responses and move from being a correcting mom to a connecting mom? Like, do you have any specific stories or examples of where God was at work and teaching you, or what he showed you in his word?
Yes, absolutely. So really, that is the heart of this book, is just giving moms not only the foundational principles, but then the practical tools to walk this out. And I will say that it is not a typical parenting book where it's prescriptive in nature. In fact, we really wrestled with having parenting in the title, because I don't want someone to think, well, this is a do A, B, C, and D, and then you're going to get these great kids, because that's not the goal of it. And in fact, the subtitle of the book is The No-Fail Guide to Launching Your Kids. And a lot of people have pushed back on that and been like, hold up, how can you say the no-fail guide to launching your kids? Because 1, your oldest is only 16, and 2, no fail? What? But really, because you can't fail when you're just faithful to walk with your kids, because the results are in God's hands. And so it's not what your kids, the choices that they make, it's not, how successful or not successful they are. It's just that you walked with them and that you were faithful with them. And so when I talked about the 4 choices that I encourage parents to make, that can be on a macro level, but also on a micro level. And so I'll give you an example. Just last week, we were walking through a situation with one of our kids. There's this amazing thing called when you write about something, you get tested on it. And I'm like, why can't I just write about chocolate? That was really great. But I'm writing, putting this book out to the world. I'm parenting, and we just have to laugh because there's been so many things with our kids in the last few weeks, especially. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if the parents of that child knew that I had a book coming out that has parents in the title, they would be mortified. But anyway, we're all a work in progress. But
absolutely.
What does it look like to actually lean in and love, and to then listen well and lead with humility and let go? So last week, I won't give all the details because it's not just, there's two people in every story and I like to protect my kids. But one of my kids was really struggling with a situation that was with another child, and the other child's parents were upset and had gotten involved in the situation. And when my child came home from this event and they were upset and something had gone down with this other child, and then the parents reached out to us. And so what does it look like to have those four choices in that? Well, ultimately in this case, it was, to lean in and love, to sit with my child and to connect with them and say, I love you and I care about you, and looking into their eyes and really showing them through my actions. That's why I love the phrase lean in, because, it requires, it's this posture of leaning into our kids and just getting down on their level if they're younger and just really stepping into their world and letting them know that they are loved. And for me, so often when there's these situations that come up, whether it's in the day-to-day or it's something bigger, instead of just jumping to that fixing mode or correcting mode, to stop when I'm feeling like, okay, we got to do something about this. So I'm a fixer by nature, to stop and send up a flare prayer. In my book, I talk about flare prayers where a lot of times you don't have the opportunity to spend 30 minutes on your knees crying out to God, but you can send up a flare prayer and say, okay, God, this is a situation. It needs to be dealt with. Please help me. What does it look like to lean in and love my child? And there's something about just praying before we have a conversation with our child, before we approach our child, to come with that posture of, I care about you and I want God's love to flow through me to you. It's really going to be impossible to yell at your child and get all frustrated with them if that is the posture that you're coming with. And so it really de-escalates things and it changes your approach, because you're thinking, how do I show Jesus love to my kid in this situation? And so in that situation last week, it was to, sit with them and then listen well. They had a lot of really big feelings about this situation. And so to let them express those big feelings and to not shut that down. It's so easy for us to, just kind of, we can almost be shocked with our kids when they are expressing big feelings, and we can parent out of fear because we're playing out thinking, oh my goodness, if they act like that at school, what are people going to think? And like, that's going to cause a problem. And what if, they're acting like this when they're 16, that's going to be really bad. And, and we play it out and we parent out of fear instead of faith. And instead of, thinking of the future and fearing the future, instead of just leaning and loving in the moment. And so allowing them, by listening well, to allow them to express what they're actually feeling. Yeah. And to ask questions, how are you doing? Tell me more about that. When did you feel like that? How did it make you feel today? And, letting them really just kind of get it all out. I know for me personally, sometimes I just need to vent some things out. My husband, I'll just go to him and I'll vent it out. And then a lot of times he'll be like trying to, give me some solutions. I'm like, oh, I'm good now. I just need to get it out. And so sometimes they just need that. And for you to be that safe space for them to be able to share their big feelings with, and to say, I'm here, I'm with you. And I think that is so important as parents. And you think about, if we were to go and share our heart with someone and some big feelings, and they just told us, you need to get over that. That is a bad attitude that you're having. Snap out of it and stop it. We do not act like that at this house. As moms, I've done that so many times, and yet we're really shutting down and shaming our child. A lot of times we do need to have a conversation about a bad attitude. We do need to, process through that. But if we just instantly go to shutting them down and shaming them, we'll never be able to get to the root of what's going on. And so to really see that listening well is not just hearing the words that they're saying, not just giving them the space to say those words and the safe space to be able to express those feelings, but also then to really hear what's underneath the surface. So oftentimes our kids are just learning how to have emotional language around things, and they're not able to really express, I actually felt sad today when this happened. Their sadness will come out as anger, or, their fear will come out as frustration. And so to give them that space to be able to share what they're feeling and then to be able to process that with them. And a lot of times then asking those questions we'll get to with my kids, instead of me telling them, here's what you need to do, I can ask them, what do you think Jesus would have you do in this situation? Yes. What do you think is the right response? And letting them process through that, because that is training and teaching them with life skills so that they're not always dependent upon us in the future, but that they are learning how to look to the Lord themselves, and they're learning how to ask Him for wisdom. And so with this situation last week, we did a lot of that. And then we prayed together, and leading with humility is the next step. And for me, a lot of times that's me being really honest with my child about situations where I, might have had similar feelings, or I might have done a similar thing, and being honest with them and sharing my heart with them and telling them, I've made the same mistake, or, I've done that before, and I know it's really hard. And it can also be, if we have lashed out at our child or responded incorrectly, going back to them and really asking for their forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Our kids don't need perfect parents. They need parents who are going to point them to a perfect God. And so constantly looking for opportunities to point them to Jesus and to lead with humility, and to realize that our words are never going to have as much weight as the life that we live before our kids.
Yeah.
And so say all day long, talk about Jesus' love and sing to them about Jesus' love and, quote verses about Jesus' love. But if they don't see His love through us, it kind of just really defeats the purpose of all that other stuff, because it's the life that we live before them. And so them seeing us lead with humility, and then ultimately letting go, which is the fourth choice. And so in this situation, letting go a lot of times means allowing our children to struggle and allowing them to have to kind of face things, and not always swooping in to protect them and carry them, as they get older. And so this situation, we talked about it, and then our child had to go and have a really hard conversation. And, we said, we're here if you need us, but we believe that you are able to go and do this yourself. And we're going to trust God, and we're going to pray with you for God to go before you. And we talked about, different scenarios of what could possibly happen and what would be the proper response, and just ask them, what if this happens, how would you respond, and letting them process through that. And I feel like ultimately that's allowing our children to look to the Lord, but it's allowing them to also grow in that confidence that Jesus is there for them as well, and He loves them, and they can look to Him, and they don't have to always have their parent there right there, and that they're looking just to their parents' faith, but that their faith can be real for them as well.
Yeah, all of that is really powerful. It's practical. It's definitely in alignment with, what God's heart for us is. And we see Him, He's gentle with us. He's forgiving with us. He's loving with us. And Christ is our model. So I want to back up and kind of swing back around to what you said about forgiveness, because I know you write about this in the book, and this is something that you address. It's the importance of us asking our children for forgiveness when we need to. And I'm just wondering what that has looked like, how God has taught you to bring that, into conversation with your kids, because many of us, and Brad and I for years, that's been something that we've implemented in our household. And it really does, it goes so far to connect your hearts to the heart of your child. But many of us did not grow up with the environment where our parents actually admitted wrong and asked for forgiveness. So how did this become a norm, or how did you begin to recognize the importance of forgiveness and asking your children for forgiveness?
So in the book, I tell a story about when I was 17 years old and I was a new driver, and it was my first time to drive our big van with my mom. I was just going down the street to teach a violin lesson because I'm a violinist and I was a violin teacher. And so we get in, and instead of putting the car in reverse, I put the car in drive. And instead of hitting the brake when I realized that, I hit the accelerator, and I crashed our family's van into the front of our family's garage. And they have this little brick area that I hit, and it wasn't very hard because I was just a few feet away, but obviously freaked my mom out a lot.
Yeah,
She's like, forget it, I will not be driving with you again for a while. But then also the front of the van was pretty much okay, but the front of the house had some damage. And I remember how scared I was to have to, for my dad to see that. And my dad got very angry with me, but I don't remember the words that he said that night when he was really angry with me. But I remember so distinctly the next day he came back and he asked my forgiveness. And that has always stuck with me, that he was willing to humble himself and say, I shouldn't have gotten angry with you last night. And I've carried that with me into my parenting and just really wanting from the get-go to admit to my kids when I've made mistakes and to be willing to acknowledge when I've done things wrong. And I think so often as moms, I hear a lot of moms talk about mom guilt and talk about laying awake at night and just kind of, going around and around and around in your head of all these things you've done wrong. And I have so done that. And especially when I was at the place of living out of the lies instead of the truth, it was such, that guilt was my constant companion. But now when those things come to me, to stop and say, okay, what is the truth? And then sometimes there's, that nagging feeling of that conviction of the Holy Spirit of, when I responded to my child, I really responded in anger and, or frustration, or I could have handled that in a much calmer manner, or I didn't listen to their heart and I just jumped to conclusions. And so going back to them and acknowledging that and asking for their forgiveness and telling them that it's something that you're working on. I think it's this beautiful example that we give to our kids that it's okay to make mistakes. That's why there's Jesus. And that, the best thing that we can do is to acknowledge that, own up to that, and then go back and ask forgiveness and truly ask forgiveness. Don't just say, well, if there's anything that I did to offend you, I'm sorry.
Right.
But really, I was wrong. Will you forgive me? And not even I was wrong. Will you forgive me? But you were wrong too. Just I was wrong. Will you forgive me? And so being honest with our kids, I think that then it sets them up for realizing that, my parents, they have struggles too, and they need Jesus too, and they're looking to the Lord and they're grappling through things. And when our kids are older and they have a situation where they make a mistake, I think it's going to come back to them and they're going to be reminded of that. And I feel like it's going to help them to be able to navigate those things so much better because we modeled before them the appropriate responses when we've made a mistake instead of just stuffing it under the rug.
Yeah, that's good. And that's something that we can all take away. I mean, and really begin to implement, because we all want grace. We just, giving it to other people can just be not as easy. But I noticed even as I was reading through the book and just really sitting with this whole thought of love-centered parenting, it's really the way we're called to live no matter the relationship. It's just we have a special opportunity when we're raising these little ones. And because if you think about it, even as you're thinking through as a wife, I mean, it can be super hard when my husband has offended me, and very easy to be flippant or, direct, unkind, all of the things. And the best thing, I mean, I can't control his response. I can control mine. And even if it's circling back around and saying, man, did I totally overreacted. I'm sorry. But, that's where I'm seeing so much of what God has brought you to along this journey of love-centered parenting really can overflow and should relationally into our marriages, into our friendships, into our, even work environments, that willingness to humbly, make confessions of wrong and asking forgiveness. And I mean, because it's really about the heart of who we're called to be as Christ followers.
100%. And I was just thinking as you were sharing, there was literally just earlier today, I had to go to a colleague. There was something that had happened and I asked forgiveness. And, it's that lean in love. And in this situation, it was, I had done something hastily that had caused them to be frustrated. And for me to really lean in love and recognize that they were frustrated and then listen well and realize, let them express their frustration with me. And then, to be able to lead with humility by asking forgiveness, but then ultimately letting go because, whether they forgive me or not, that's in God's hands. That's not my responsibility, but my responsibility is how I respond. I always tell my kids, my response is my responsibility. And so this lean in love and listen well and lead with humility and ultimately letting go, it can apply to all relationships. And I feel like there's just so much freedom there. And we're able to then just live as loved and love other people wholeheartedly because of how much we're loved by God.
Yeah. I mean, and the greatest commandment Jesus made clear is to love God and love others and love our neighbors as ourselves, our neighbors, our children, our loved ones, our family, our relatives, the literal neighbors, all of them, all of the people of the world. And that really is what God cares about the most, as came from the lips of Jesus. So I think, this is such an important topic, Crystal, and I'm so grateful that you joined me to share this. So what is the biggest hope that you have for someone who picks up this book in terms of takeaway? And then after you share any final thoughts, I would love if you would just take a moment to pray over my Graceology community about all these things. Pray for those young moms who are listening, for the grandmas, for the aunts, for all of us to love well.
My biggest hope and my prayer has been since the beginning of this book, I just really felt like this was a book that God called me to write. It was not something that I ever sought out to write. I wrote my last book in 2015, never thought that I was going to write another book. And then when Bethany House came to me and just repeatedly for 9 months said, we really feel like God has called you to write another book. And I just kept praying, and God just kept giving the green light and giving the green light. And little did I know that, I was going to have these 2 newborns in the middle of finishing writing this book. And I look back and I know that this is his message, because I couldn't have done it in my own strength. I couldn't have been caring for 2 newborns in the middle of a pandemic and writing these words. And I just really feel like this is God's book. And if anything comes from, and I realize that sounds sacrilegious, or I'm not talking like this is the Bible or something, but this is the book that God gave me. These are the words that he gave me to write. And I just have to trust him with it. And again, just let go and say, okay, God, whatever you want to do with this. But my biggest hope and the reason that I wrote it is really because I feel like there are so many moms who are so weary and tired and exhausted, and they're carrying around this weight that they were never called to bear, and feeling like their job is something that is so much bigger and so much greater than they can ever do on their own. And I just want to point them to Jesus, and for them to see how much they are loved by their Heavenly Father, and that they don't have to do more, try more, strive harder, be better in order to achieve or attain his love, but that they are loved by him, and that they could rest in that love and receive that love and then live out of that love to their kids, in their homes, in their marriages, in their communities, and ultimately around the world. And so my heart has just been, God, please use this book to challenge hearts and change homes. And that's my prayer. So let me pray over everyone who's listening right now. Dear Heavenly Father, I just think of all of the women who are listening right now. And God, I don't know where they're at. I don't know what burdens they're bearing, what struggles they are currently walking through. I don't know the heaviness of their heart, but you do, God. And Lord, I just pray that each woman who hears these words, that you would just meet her in a special way to let her know how much she's loved by you, that she doesn't need to keep trying so hard to do things in her own strength, that she doesn't need to keep working her fingers to the bone in exhaustion to try to win the approval of others and of you, but that she is enough in you. And when you look at her, you see someone who is redeemed, who is loved, who is forgiven, who is chosen, who is beautiful. When you look at her, you see Jesus. She's covered in the blood, and she doesn't have to carry around those lies and those false beliefs that she's a disappointment or that she's not enough, because the truth is she is enough in you, and that you love her, and that you want to be with her, and that you want to carry these burdens, and she can lay them down at your feet and you will carry them for her. And I just pray that each woman listening, that you would allow her to be able to bask in your love and receive your love and rest in your love and find that freedom of who she is in Christ and how much she is loved by him, and that she could live out of that love to others, that she could live as love, that she could act as loved me would, that she would believe to the depths of her soul that she is fully forgiven and fully loved, and that then that love would permeate everything that she does, that she could lean in love and listen well and lead with humility and ultimately let go and leave things in your hands, trusting for the future, whatever that looks like, and that she could just live today with freedom and rest. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. The book is Love-Centered Parenting. Got lots of notes from today's show. If you want to check those out, you can go to gwensmith.net/Graceology. Find my episode with Crystal Paine, and we will hook you up with links to the book, links to Crystal's blog, all of the things, her social. Crystal, it has been so awesome to have you on the Graceology podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Well, I don't know about you, but even though my kids are not young, that conversation sure did give me so much to consider, to pray about, and to be challenged by. So I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Crystal Paine. Be sure to visit her online and connect with her on social media. All of the links and the show notes from today's episode can be found at gwensmith.net/Graceology. That's gwensmith.net/Graceology. Hey, if your church hosts women's events, or if you have questions, comments, or topic suggestions, I love hearing from you. Hit me with a message or a speaking inquiry right from my website at gwensmith.net. I want to give a special shout out to the Graceology listeners who support the show through Patreon. If you are one of my Graceology girls, be sure to join our Patreon community. When you support the show through Patreon, you'll get exclusive content, early access, behind-the-scenes fun, and even some private hangouts with me. Learn more by visiting patreon.com/Graceology. That's Patreon, patreon.com/Graceology with an IE. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be back with another episode soon, but until then, if you haven't already subscribed to the Graceology podcast, please open up your podcast app right now and click that subscribe button. That way you will never miss a thing. And be sure to connect with me on social as well. I'm at Gwen Smith Music on every platform. And the show is at Graceology with an IE. Now get out there and have a beautiful, grace-filled day.